Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. Good to have you along for the conversation. My next guest, you see him all over the place because he works more than the average person, that's for sure. Brian Kilmeade is at Fox News. In the meantime, he also writes some great books, including George Washington's Secret Six, a book that I read, by the way, and thought was fabulous. Haven't talked to Brian in a while. Brian, nice to see you.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Steve.
And you've got a brand new book I want to get to, The President and the Freedom Fighter, about Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. But first, how about what's going on in the country? I mean, you spend your time immersed in this, as I do. Close battles for the House and Senate, kind of unexpected history, which you're something that you pay a lot of attention to. Should have been on the Republican side, and yet didn't really materialize. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I think matchups make fights and matchups make Senate races. It's how each person matches up. In terms of the issues, if you look at the exit polling, abortion's number 2, but it's a distant. Economy's number 1. They say 50% of the people did not think it was Joe Biden's fault, this huge inflation, the huge spending, the fact that we're not energy independent. It didn't resonate enough to be a wave. Now, keep in mind, Steve, and I don't have to tell you this, if they hold on and they take the House, and they're pretty much a united House caucus for the most part. The Freedom Caucus is not as big and dangerous as it was, and Jim Jordan seems to be getting along with Kevin McCarthy. That's a check. And it's not out of the question. In fact, it could be, some people think it's expected that they do get a one seat lead when it comes to the Senate if Herschel wins December 6th. So having said all that, the wave didn't exist, but if the power's there, it doesn't matter as much.
Exactly right. I'll agree with you on everything across the board. Right now, Nevada, razor-thin lead for Laxalt. Looks like he could hold on to that seat. And in the first 24 hours, Herschel Walker has delivered something like $4.5 million has come into his campaign in 24 hours. I mean, it's a remarkable amount of money. Ted Cruz already on the campaign trail with him. Brian Kemp, the newly reelected governor of Georgia, will be on the campaign trail. So will Donald Trump. So will Ron DeSantis. They're going to bring in the whole crew.
I think Kemp is the most valuable. I thought it was interesting that today's Atlanta Journal-Constitution, they said that Kemp said that Walker Kemp never contacted them. Wow. So,
yeah.
He's so popular. He clearly had about an 8-point lead last 3 months. You would think that they look to combine. And I thought the story would be that Kemp wanted to keep his distance because he wanted to stay out of that fight and just focus on Stacey Abrams. But I think he's the most valuable, DeSantis the most valuable, Youngkin the most valuable, because what you got to do is the old story. You got the Republicans. You got to motivate them to come out. They will.
Yep.
Number 2 is you got to get some independents and moderates to say, not that bad. I don't really want to rubber stamp Joe Biden, or I do. If you do want to rubber stamp Joe Biden, you're independent. That's up to, you got 4 weeks if you're Herschel Walker to change their mind. But if you're sitting next to Youngkin and Youngkin says, hey, this is what I did, and Kemp says, this is what I know, meet with my team, this is what I did, this is what I learned in 4 years from that close battle with Stacey Abrams to the big battle. This is how I made inroads in the black community, which is a joke that he can't win over the black community because he grew up dirt poor in the poorest section of Georgia.
Did. Yeah.
And you would think you'd have more resonance. But I'd be focusing on that. Whatever you do, don't lay back like Senator Perdue did.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. Those 3 governors are all key. DeSantis, Kemp, and Youngkin, all key to Walker getting over the finish line. Now, this morning, talking to you guys, I think that Kemp said he thinks he can get Walker over the finish line. And with the Libertarian out of the race, that's another 2.1, 2.2% that should break majority for Walker. I think his chances are pretty good. So we'll see what happens. It's politics, Brian. We've been through this before, man. Close races, nail biters. That's the way it is. So let's talk about this book a little bit. You are a student of history. You're very good at it, sports-minded. But why Abe Lincoln and Frederick Douglass? 2 fascinating historical figures, big impact on America. Why this book?
Well, a couple of things. One, just moving through time. George Washington's Secret Six, I worked on for 20 years. I just thought it would be a great movie till Bill O'Reilly started writing his books and having all the success with these well-known stories, but doing it in a conversational, welcoming way.
Yeah.
I went up to Bill and I just said, listen, do you think this is have you ever heard of this? He goes, I lived there. I never heard of it. So that book did well, which led to Thomas Jefferson, the Tripoli Pirates, which is the next big conflict you probably never heard about unless you're a Marine, and was our first war on terror. And that went well. And then for War of 1812, I didn't think it had any good, not enough traction, and how close our country came to total collapse. And Andrew Jackson, this orphan guy that ends up being a two-term president, but first
Sure.
a war hero. I go, maybe I could introduce that story, which brought me to Texas. Sam Houston and the Alamo, you got it, you heard it. But what if I told you what happened after? And then it brought me to Civil War. And I thought about it. We're in the middle of the George Floyd riots. Do I
Sure.
really want to dive into this? And the answer was yes, but how? It's so well written about in the Civil War. How do I bring something new? And I said, what if I talk about two of the most well-known figures at that time and how they came together and how their unlikely story proved invaluable to our survival as a country? And that was my hope, that people
Yeah.
would read this and say, okay, I'll split off. I got to learn more about Lincoln. I'm going to learn more about Douglas. What I wanted to do is talk about how they finally came together. And also, would you learn by listening? These
Yeah.
are the smartest people on the planet. And they listen to each other from their perspective. It's so valuable.
I have to remark on, I have to go back to what you said about the Marines in Tripoli, only because this is the week that the Marines were created in 1775, I believe. And, you know, the Marines were created because, my understanding, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the pirates said to Jefferson, we'll leave your ships alone if you pay us. And he said, you know, I don't think that's a very good idea. I think I'll just get rid of those pirate ships. And that's kind of the way it played out, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, of all people, Jefferson, who was asked to get a militia together in the Revolutionary War and said, yeah, I'm not much of a fighter. When he's out there and hears about our merchant ships, the ship being taken, the merchants being kept as hostages to be ransomed off, the cargo being plundered, and knowing that we have to get ourselves out of war debt and we need the Mediterranean, they thought, hey, let's just talk about it. I'm going to go meet Tripoli's the main problem, Libya. So we're just going to, Adams goes and meets with the Libyan ambassador, makes great progress. And then he says, hey, Tom, come on over. You're just in France. We're just going to meet with this guy, work out a deal, let him understand that their problems with England and Spain and old Europe, we're new. We have no problem with them. And then when he came, he goes, yeah, we're going to charge you three times as much to get you guys back. And we're going to need a lot of gifts. You got to give us a lot of gifts.
Yeah, he didn't
And
like that so much. No.
yeah.
Created the Marines.
It led to the big conflict.
I want to make sure I don't run out of time here. I got about a minute and a half here. Give me a fact about the conversations between Lincoln and Douglas that people would not have. I mean, I have no idea this happened, right? Give me something
I'll give you the last
really
conversation.
interesting.
And by the way, Steve, one of the things I did is the first thing that turned me on to the story that I thought would be great is that Frederick Douglass wrote his biography, and he kept updating it. So I go to quotes. So anyone who says, well, I'm making it too easy because I'm a white guy, or making it too tough because for whatever reason, where I work or what I do, I just say, I'm going to start with the quotes. I'm going to build around the quotes. So I'll give you the last interaction, the best I can remember, that was chronicled by Frederick Douglass about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln gives his inaugural address, and it's short. It's right to the point. It talks about reconciliation, forgiveness, not revenge. You just want a war. A lot of people are upset. And one thing that Lincoln would say later is, this thing's going to wear well. I know it's not too well accepted now, but I think it's going to wear well. Where he basically said to the South, if you put down your guns and swear allegiance, let's get the family back together. And that's what Frederick Douglass wanted. Get this. His former slave said, forget it. I don't want revenge. I want reconciliation. I want a country. And he walks in. He gets into the White House, invited to the party after. And I guess you call it the ball. And Lincoln spots him across the way. He stops and he says, my friend Douglas. He never called him Frederick, called him Douglas. Right. What did you think of the speech? Everyone stops and listens. And Douglas is embarrassed. He goes, Mr. President, you got a room full of people here. Don't worry about me. You got other things to do. What do you worry about my opinion? He said, Douglas, there's no one's opinion who I care for more. Tell me, what did you think of the speech? He stopped and he said, sir, it was a sacred effort. And that was the last interaction that they had. And he meant it. He wasn't saying things he wanted to hear because they were on the same page. We got to forgive. We got to flood the South with housing and educators. We got to get them with teachers. We got to make the transition. And it was sadly, John Wilkes Booth stopped all that.
You know, I'm going to ask you this, Brian, last question, because I live in America today, as we all do, very divided, very tribal, caustic in some ways, I think is a fair way to put it. How do we get back to a place where people that come from different backgrounds, like these two did, like Douglas and Lincoln, and reach across the aisle and say, look, I don't agree with you necessarily, but I'm not going to demonize you. I'm not going to turn you into some sort of monster to everybody else. I'm not going to smear your name. I'm just going to say, hey, we've got better. Can we ever get back there again?
I think we're going to get to it. And, Youngkin's the example of that. The guy's really not a hater. And if you think about DeSantis, he's abrupt, but all he is for the people. He's just trying to get parents. He's just not going, I'm a Republican, agree with me. He's out there and he's saying, Disney, no, this is not a don't say gay bill, and we're not going to stand up to corporations. So I think you can be firm if you go fight for the people. I think we can get to that. And I think you need a common enemy. Hate to say it, but we do have a common cause, and it's China. China's
Agreed.
out to destroy us in every way. And I
true.
see Republicans and Democrats sound almost exactly alike at this point, the ones that haven't sold their soul. And
Yeah.
And I'm going to be I host One Nation on Saturdays. I'm going to talk to Phil Knight this Saturday. And when I get to him, the founder of Nike, I'm going to say, what's it going to take to get the manufacturing out of China? And is it indeed possible to get all these companies out of China? Because they're looking to hamstring them, make them more obligated to them than to us. And I think that's one thing that could bring us together. I think things are going to get better. I really do.
Well, I'm an optimist too, Brian. I hope you're right. We talk politics, we talk opinion here, but I hope you're right. Brian Kilmeade, greatly appreciate the book, by the way, The President and the Freedom Fighter, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass. If you haven't read any of Brian's books, you should. They're all terrific.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. We'll take a break and be right back.